is this the point where we talk about what would have happened if they wrestled each other? How would that have gone down?
Yeah, let's talk about it now. So, Austin Hogan never happened. There was I think it was after a Raw in 2002 where Austin stunnered Hogan.
They did a handicap match before WrestleMania.
The 3-on-2.
Yeah.
But they never had a one-on-one match.
No. And they were only in the ring together for maybe 30 seconds or something.
So what would have happened? What would have been? Do you think it should have happened? Do you think this conversation would change if it had happened?
Probably. I mean, I think it wouldn't have been I think it would have been more interesting behind the scenes than in the ring, as in terms of as a match, because Austin wasn't going to be The Rock, and he wasn't going to let Hogan do what he did to The Rock, but at the same time, their styles didn't really mesh that well by that point, which is the only time they could have had a match, realistically. I mean, Hogan at his peak and Austin at his peak, Austin had lost. There's no doubt about it, because Hogan never lost, and nor should he have back then. But Austin in '97, and that's not quite his peak, but towards his peak, Austin lost all the time. He lost on basically every pay-per-view, and even '98, '99, Austin would lose far more than Hogan did. So just based on numbers alone, you'd think Hogan's going to win that one. I mean, what should have happened though is Austin should have beat him. That should have been the passing of the torch, the defining moment from one generation to the next. One megastar to the next. It's a shame we didn't get it, but I think the fantasy of it, as is often the case with these things, the fantasy of it's probably better than the reality of it would have been.
Yeah, because if you because that's like the biggest dream match, right? Like Austin Hogan is the biggest dream match that everybody talks about.
Yeah, I would say so.
But another one that people band about all the time is Undertaker and Sting. And if that had happened in 2005, I'm trying to think of a time when they were both still able to go, and it was, that could have been great. They could have done a series. I think it would have exceeded the expectations that people had, because they could both really go. Undertaker at that point was starting to become a better worker. Sting was really good at that point. Whereas the problem with Austin Hogan is, I don't think realistically there was any point where it could have happened where it would have been good. I know, if they'd have done it. So let's look at the two times they could have done it. The 05-06 teases of it, from Hogan on the Raw Homecoming show, teasing that it's going to happen, or Austin saying he's got a cannon whip past Hulk Hogan's name on it at the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
If it had happened then, there's no good answer. Because if people love them both, because people just love them both, then if Austin wins, the Hogan fans are gutted. If Hogan wins, the Austin fans are gutted, and they're both retired. They're both... There's no
winner
torch to pass.
There's no real winner there.
But then what people don't really bring up, which I think is a really valid point, and this is how clever Austin is it would have been career suicide if he took the match with Hogan at WrestleMania 18. Suicide. Yeah. Because Austin was so stale in early 02. He had the, Vengeance 01, that double header with Jericho Angle, Rock, and Austin was not good.
Yeah, no, it was.
And then there was the No Way Out match with Jericho. It was really bad. That was saved by an NWO run-in. WrestleMania with Scott Hall. So if he had, at WrestleMania, instead of facing Scott Hall, faced Hogan... Now, bearing in mind that Rock wasn't even... Look what Hogan did to The Rock, and Rock wasn't even competition to him. Austin was like, this is the guy... Some of the arguments you've made today, this is the only guy that's ever beat you, this is the only guy that's ever done more than you, he would have...
Would Austin have allowed that, though? Because Austin had a chip on his shoulder with Hogan because of what happened in WCW, right?
Yeah.
Hogan brings in his friends. One of them's, Jim Duggan. Beats Austin in a couple of seconds. Austin gets phased out completely. I'm sure there was a time when Austin was supposed to, or asked to work a program with Hogan, and he was told it'd happen, and then it's WCW, so it didn't happen, or Hogan put the kibosh on it or whatever. Because then he went to ECW, obviously. Austin did all those promos, the Hulk Hogan promos, which are great and really funny, but there was obviously an issue there. It's the same reason he didn't work with, Jarrett later on, because you remembered the terrible payoffs in USWA and Memphis and such. So, Austin did hold those grudges, so if it had happened, I think it would have been a real power struggle, and I don't think he'd have allowed it to happen.
But I think once you get in the ring, you can't... I mean, even if you look at Hogan and Michaels later on, you can't out-politic Hogan in the ring. I mean, you could, then. You couldn't do it. And I think Austin was smart enough to know, if I do this, the odds are he's going to fuck me. He's going to do what he does. He's going to get over. And then I'm already kind of stale, because he knew he was stale. Walked out the next night. Yeah. It would have been worse. It would have been, I think at that point, this debate would be different. I think people would remember Hogan bigger than Austin, because Austin went out on a high, as we're about to talk about, opponents and legacies and stuff. Austin went out on a high with The Rock at WrestleMania 19, but he might have went out against Hogan.
But he'd have won that match.
But nobody would have remembered that. People would have remembered, because that would have still...
Would they have turned on Austin the same way they turned on Rock? Would they, though? Because The Rock was... Austin was in Hollywood by that
Austin
point.
was far staler than The Rock was at that point.
Yeah, he was, but the fans were less... They didn't used to turn on people like they do now.
Yeah.
And that was what made that match, really, because it was so unexpected, I guess. And Rock, because he had that one foot in Hollywood, and whereas you've got Hogan's back, they love Hogan again, and it's Toronto and everything. Would Austin have got that reaction? I don't know.
If Austin was kind of stale and he was going to WrestleMania, didn't really have, because 2001 he does the heel turn, then right before the invasion he does the big babyface turn, he's Team WWF, then he turns again at Survivor Series, and then it's kind of, it's not great.
No, it wasn't.
And then you've got Hogan who's come back, who is going to Toronto, which is one of his best markets, and they wanted to love Hulk Hogan that night. That was what they wanted to do. And I think even with Austin, I don't think it would have been as bad, but I still think it would have been 75-80% of what it was.
Yeah, maybe.
And that would have been... Austin was smart enough to know that would happen, and to go, no, I'm not doing this.